My name is Sarah Miller, and this is the story of how my life got turned upside down. Not once, but twice. I guess I should start from the beginning. I was born to the best parents a kid could ask for, Tom and Ellen Haze, in a quiet little town in Pennsylvania where the winters bite harder than the summers soothe. Dad was a librarian with a soft voice and a head full of stories. Mom, a teacher who could make fractions sound like an adventure. We lived in a cozy brick house with a crooked mailbox and a porch swing that creaked just right. Money was tight, but love wasn't. We were happy. That is, until I hit 15, and everything I knew shattered like ice on a frozen pond. It was a snowy Friday night, the kind where the world feels muffled and still. Mom and Dad had gone to a school fundraiser, promising to bring me back a slice of pie. I was sprawled on the couch with Grandma, her knitting needles clicking over some goofy cartoon, when the phone rang. I didn't think much of it, probably a neighbor checking in, until I heard Grandma's soft gasp from the kitchen. A chill shot through me, sharp and cold, like I'd swallowed the wind outside. She came back, her face crumpled, and whispered, "There's been an accident." The next few days blurred into a haze of hospital antiseptic and hushed voices. Mom was gone, killed instantly when a hit-and-run driver slammed into their car on an icy backroad. Dad survived, but barely. When I finally saw him, hooked to machines with bandages over his eyes, he wasn't the man I'd known. The crash had stolen his sight, leaving him blind and broken. "Sarah," he rasped, fumbling for my hand from the hospital bed. "I'm so sorry, kiddo. So sorry." His voice cracked, and I squeezed his fingers, confused. "It's not your fault, Dad," I said, my throat tight. A drunk coward had fled the scene. Why was he apologizing? But as I got older, I figured it out. He was sorry for what we'd lost. Mom's laugh, his easy grin, the life where he could scoop me up and spin me around. He thought he'd failed me, but Dad, Tom Haze, was tougher than he knew. After months of rehab, adjusting to a world he couldn't see, he came home. Our brick house felt emptier without Mom's humming, but Dad filled it with something else. Grit. He threw himself into his work, trading dusty library shelves for a recorder and a microphone. "Audiobooks," he told me one night, his voice steadier than I'd heard in months. "I can still tell stories." And he did, narrating novels with that same gentle cadence, turning pain into purpose. I was 15, gangly and quiet, with Mom's brown hair and Dad's stubborn streak. Those first years after the crash, I stuck to him like glue. Friends drifted, too awkward around the blind guy's kid. But I didn't care. Dad made sure I had what I needed: school supplies, a secondhand bike, a roof that didn't leak. "You're my eyes now, Sarah," he'd tease, ruffling my hair as I described the sunset he couldn't see. We'd laugh over burnt dinners. He'd try cooking, I'd try saving it. And for a while, we were okay. But deep down, I knew it wasn't the end of the chaos. Life had more curveballs coming, and the next one would hit harder than I could have guessed. After the crash, our little brick house in Pennsylvania turned into a different kind of home. Quieter, sadder, but somehow tougher too. Dad came back from rehab with a cane tapping the floor and a determination I hadn't seen before. He couldn't shelve books anymore, but he found a new gig narrating audiobooks, his voice weaving tales through a microphone in our cramped living room. I'd sit there, 15 and awkward, listening to him record Hemingway or Austen, marveling at how he turned darkness into something alive. "Gotta keep the lights on, Sarah," he'd say with a lopsided grin. And I'd nod, knowing I'd do anything to keep him going too. As I stumbled into my teenage years, Dad made sure I didn't miss out. He'd nudge me toward debate club or track. "Go live, kiddo, I've got this." But the truth? I liked being with him best. We'd argue over whether The Great Gatsby was overrated. He said no, I said yes. Watch scratchy VHS tapes of the Beatles concerts he couldn't see, or tackle my algebra homework together, him tracing equations in his head while I scribbled. When college rolled around, he wouldn't hear of me staying home. "You need to spread your wings," he said one night, his voice firm over the hum of his recorder. "Don't fuss over me, I'll be fine." "Ah, mais ça." I chewed my lip, hating the thought of leaving him alone in that creaky house. But he was right. So off I went to Penn State, majoring in finance, promising to call every Sunday. That's where I met Ben. He was in my econ class, tall, with a crooked smile, and a laugh that cut through the lecture hall noise. Through my roommate Claire, I found out he was her second cousin, and soon we were inseparable. I told him about Dad early, braced for the pity or the flinch, but Ben just shrugged. Sounds like a cool guy. The first time they met, Dad played Sgt. Pepper's on his old stereo, and Ben sang along, off-key and grinning. "Your dad's awesome," he told me later, squeezing my hand. "And you're incredible for sticking by him." I brushed it off, cheeks warm, but inside I was floating. For the first time since Mom died, I thought maybe I could have it all. Love, laughter, a shot at normal. After graduation, things clicked into place. I landed a job at a local credit union, crunching numbers, while Ben started driving delivery routes across the state. We dated 3 years before he proposed, down on one knee in the park where we'd first kissed, leaves crunching underfoot. "Yes, Ben," I said, heart pounding, "but I can't leave Dad. He needs me." He flashed that crooked smile. "Wouldn't dream of it. We'll live together. Your dad's place has room, right?" I nodded, tears prickling. The wedding was small, just us and a handful of friends in a chapel with stained glass. Dad insisted on guiding me down the aisle, his cane tapping a steady rhythm, and I swear every eye was misty when I took Ben's hand. But fairy tales have their dragons, and mine wore designer coats. Ben's mom, Clara, and his sister, Rachel, sized me up from day one. "So, your father's blind?" Clara asked at our first dinner, her nose wrinkling like she'd stepped in something sour. "Yes," I said, keeping my voice even. "And he narrates audiobooks, best in the business." She smirked, uninterested. "How quaint." Then she turned to Ben. "Plenty of girls come from solid families, you know." My face burned, but Ben jumped in. "Sarah's family is solid, Mom. I love her. Deal with it." Clara shut up, but her eyes stayed cold. Rachel was worse, mirroring her mom's sneer, barely speaking to me. I tried to shrug it off, but their disdain stuck like damp chill, a warning of storms brewing on the horizon. After the wedding, Ben moved into Dad's brick house with me, and for a while, it felt like we'd cracked the code to happiness. I'd head to the credit union, balancing ledgers, while Ben crisscrossed Pennsylvania in his delivery van, hauling packages from Pittsburgh to Philly. When he was home, we'd crowd around the kitchen table with Dad. Me cooking spaghetti, Ben sneaking extra garlic, Dad teasing us about the smoke alarm. "You two'll burn the place down," he'd chuckle, his cane propped nearby, and we'd laugh until our sides hurt. It wasn't perfect. Money was tight. Ben's hours were long. But it was ours. Dad's audiobook gig kept picking up steam, and I'd catch him humming old Beatles tunes while recording late into the night. "Gotta keep my girls fed," he'd say, winking in my general direction. But that brick house, cozy as it was, had its limits. Narrow halls, creaky steps he couldn't climb blind. One night, Ben came home from a route, voice buzzing through the phone. "Sarah, I've been thinking. What if we got a bungalow? Big windows for Tom to hear the birds, a flat layout, maybe a yard for you to mess with." I glanced at Dad, hunched over his mic, and grinned. "What do you say, Dad?" I asked, switching to speaker. His face lit up, sightless eyes crinkling. "Birds'd be nice, and fresh air." That settled it. We hunted for weeks, finally snagging a single-story bungalow with wide doorways and a backyard begging for flowers. The mortgage was a leap. Ben's pay, my salary, and rent from Dad's old place barely covered it. But we moved in on a crisp spring day, Dad rolling out to the porch with a sigh. "Perfect, Sarah," he said, voice thick. "Thank you." I planted daisies that summer, Dad soaking in the sun while I weeded, and for a stretch, it felt like we'd outrun the shadows. Then came Clara and Rachel. They'd tolerated me at the wedding, barely, but living with Ben under one roof lit their fuse. Whenever they visited, the air turned sour. Clara'd sweep in, all pearls and pursed lips, acting like she owned the place. Rachel trailed her, tossing snide remarks like confetti. So, Tom just sits there all day? Clara asked once, eyeing Dad on the porch, like he was a stray dog. He works, I shot back. Harder than most. So, she'd hum, unconvinced, then whisper to Rachel, loud enough for me to hear. Such a pity Ben's tied to this. My hands clenched, but I bit my tongue, for Ben. It boiled over at the barbecue. We'd thrown it to christen the bungalow, friends, co-workers, burgers sizzling. Clara and Rachel showed up late, noses high, picking at the food like it'd bite back. Dad was in the yard, chatting with Claire about some audiobook plot, when Clara marched over. Tom, you must be tired, she said, her voice dripping fake sugar. And before I could blink, she grabbed his chair and shoved it toward the garage. Let's get you out of the sun. More practical in there, right? Dad froze, hands fumbling. I bolted over, heart hammering. Clara, stop! I yelled, grabbing the chair. What are you doing? She smirked. Just helping. He doesn't need all this fuss. Garages are fine for... She trailed off, but the word hung there. Cripples. Ben stormed up, face red. Mom, what the hell? Let go of Tom, now! Clara blinked, startled, but dropped the handles. Honey, I just... Out, he snapped. You and Rachel, leave. Rachel huffed, but they slunk off, leaving a stunned hush. Ben knelt by Dad, voice breaking. I'm so sorry, Tom. I didn't know she'd... Dad patted his arm, steady as ever. Not your fault, son. Some folks can't see past their noses. I stood there, shaking, fury and relief crashing together. Ben pulled me close that night, whispering, You and Tom are my family. They're not worth it. I nodded, but the sting lingered. Claire and Rachel weren't done. They just sharpened their claws. Life in the bungalow settled into a rhythm after the barbecue blowout. Bruised, but steady. I'd crunch numbers at the credit union. Ben would haul packages across the state, and Dad kept spinning stories into his mic, the hum of his voice a constant in our little haven. Clara and Rachel kept their distance, and I was fine with that. Ben's routes got longer, his delivery gig booming. But when he was home, we'd sprawl on the porch with Dad, listening to crickets and planning a future that felt close enough to touch. Then came the call that ripped it all apart. I was at work, elbow deep in tax forms, when my phone buzzed. Mrs. Miller? A gruff voice asked. Officer Daniels from the state police. My stomach dropped. Yes? I croaked. I'm sorry to tell you, your husband, Ben Miller, was in an accident, a forklift malfunction at the warehouse. He didn't make it. The words hit like static. Forklift, warehouse, didn't make it, buzzing around me as the room tilted. I mumbled a thank you, hung up, and sat there, hands trembling, until my boss sent me home. Ben was gone. The next week was a fog, funeral plans, casseroles from neighbors, Dad's quiet hand on mine. I moved like a ghost, barely grasping it. The day of the funeral was cold and gray, rain tapping the church roof. Half the town showed. Ben was loved, his crooked smile a fixture at every barbecue. I stood by his casket, numb, Dad beside me whispering, We'll get through this, kiddo. People filed past, murmuring condolences. But Clara and Rachel? Nowhere. Not a call, not a card. I should have known they'd show their faces another way. We got home late, rain-soaked and hollow, and something felt off. The bungalow's lights blazed when I'd sworn I'd turned them off. Dad, you leave anything on? I asked, frowning. He shook his head. Nope. My pulse kicked up as I pushed the door open, and there they were. Clara and Rachel in my living room, surrounded by boxes and Ben's old guitar case. What the hell is this? I demanded, grief morphing into rage. Clara turned, her face a mask of crocodile tears. Oh, Sarah, we're just helping. You can't keep this place without Ben. We're taking what's ours. Rachel piped up, syrupy sweet. You can move back to Tom's rental. Cozy, right? I stared, speechless. They'd skipped his funeral to loot us? Get out, I said, voice low and shaking. This is my house. Clara smirked. Ben's property's ours now. We're his real family. That snapped something. Real family? I exploded. Where were you today? Crying at his grave? No, you were here, pawing through his stuff like vultures. I grabbed my phone. I'm calling the cops. Clara's eyes widened. They hadn't expected a fight. But before I dialed, a memory hit. Ben mentioning a will last spring, laughing it off as just in case. Hold on, I said, stalling, and called Claire instead. Ben ever talk about a lawyer? She confirmed it. Thompson and Sons. The next day, Dad and I met Mr. Thompson, a wiry guy with a calm nod. Ben left everything to you, Sarah. House, savings, van, and a letter. I read it, tears streaming. Sarah, Tom's my dad too. You're my family, not them. Stay strong. I faced Clara and Rachel that afternoon, letter in hand. It's mine, legally. Leave, or I press charges. They slunk off, Clara hissing, This isn't over. But it was. For me, it was. Clara and Rachel stormed out of the bungalow that day, their taillights fading into the rain, and I stood in the doorway, Ben's letter crumpled in my fist. Mr. Thompson's words echoed. House, savings, van, all mine, and Dad's hand found my shoulder. They're gone, Sarah, he said, voice soft but sure. We're okay. I nodded, chest tight, and sank onto the couch, the silence swallowing me. They'd lost, but it didn't feel like winning, not with Ben gone. Still, something shifted. Those ties to his venomous family snapped, and I was free to grieve, to rebuild. The weeks after were a blur of paperwork and quiet. The insurance from Ben's van came through, a fat check that paid off the bungalow and left a cushion. I threw myself into sorting his things, finding solace in the mundane. His scrawled grocery lists, a mixtape of the Who he'd made me. Dad kept close, narrating audiobooks from the porch, his voice a lifeline through the fog. You're tougher than you think, kiddo, he'd say, and I'd try to believe him. The bungalow felt emptier without Ben's laugh, but it was ours, mine and Dad's, and that held me together. Then came the twist I never saw coming. A month after the funeral, I was at the credit union when a wave of nausea hit, sharp, relentless. I barely made it to the bathroom, chalking it up to stress, but it didn't stop. Days of queasy mornings piled up, and a whisper in my head grew louder. I stopped by the drugstore, hands shaky as I grabbed a pregnancy test, and raced home. The wait was torture, 3 minutes stretching into forever, until 2 pink lines stared back at me. I slid to the floor, tears hot and fast, a storm of joy and ache crashing in. Dad? I called, voice breaking. He tapped in, concern etching his face. What's wrong? I held up the test. I'm pregnant. He pulled me into a hug, his laugh shaky. A gift, Sarah. Ben's still with us. That baby changed everything. I'd lie awake, hand on my belly, imagining Ben's crooked smile on a little face. Grief didn't vanish. It sat heavy, but hope sprouted alongside it, green and stubborn like the daisies out back. Dad was my rock, rigging a nursery with audio cues he could see, joking, Gotta teach this kid the classics. Beatles first. We settled into a new groove, just us two waiting for 3, and I found a strength I didn't know I had. Then they came back. It was a sunny afternoon, me tending the yard, when Clara's sedan rolled up. My gut clenched, one hand on my swelling stomach. She and Rachel stepped onto the porch, looking worn. Clara's pearls dull, Rachel's smirk gone. Sarah, Clara started, voice thin. We've hit rough times, a bad investment, lost everything. Can we stay in Tom's old rental, just till we're steady? I stared, incredulous. After all they'd done, they had the gall? No, I said, calm but iron hard. That's not an option. We're done. Clara's eyes flicked to my belly, narrowing. Pregnant already? She spat. Moving on fast. Ben's barely cold. Rage flared, but I swallowed it, smiling tight. My life's not your business. Leave! Rachel tugged her arm, whispering, but Clara's glare lingered, venomous, defeated, before they drove off. I watched them go, peace settling in. Ben would have been proud. I'd guarded our family, our future. Now I'm 28. The bungalow paid off, savings safe, and a baby on the way. Dad's out back, narrating To Kill a Mockingbird while I plant more daisies for Ben. Clara and Rachel? Gossip says they're scraping by in a trailer somewhere. I don't check, don't care. This life's mine, built from love and loss, and every kick in my belly proves I'm enough. That girl who lost her mom, who held her blind dad's hand, she's unbreakable now, and she's not slowing down.